Okay, we are picking up. I've got this divided, the rest of the book divided into fifths, figuring, okay, we'll try to do a total of 5 days, 6 days with this book and 6 days with the next book, and it's probably still not going to be enough. I know I said we were going to pick up around 47, but need to back up just a little bit to 43. Sabriel has met Colonel Horace, okay, and she asks him, do you know my father? Notice the change of tense right there. He doesn't understand why she changes the tense. She says, he used to visit me twice a year. I guess he would have come through here. He says, yes, I saw him. I first met him more than 20 years ago when I was posted here as a subaltern, strange time, blah, 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 blah. And then he looks at her and he says, you're a necromancer. So you'll understand. This crossing point has seen too many battles, too many dead. And he goes on and says, never mind the fact that over time there would be such a concentration of death mixed with free magic leaking over the wall that everything would, she finishes the sentence, not stay dead. He says, that's right. When I arrived 20 years ago, okay, corpses wouldn't stay buried. Our people or Old Kingdom creatures. Okay? Soldiers killed the day before would turn up on parade. Creatures prevented from crossing would rise up and do more damage. Okay. This is all foreshadowing. Nix is writing this here because we're going to see the same thing, okay, come up later in the novel. So he says, one time we were out on patrol, we see this man sitting on top of a charter stone. And he goes on and says, it was Abhorsen. He was coming to us because he'd heard about the dead. So we let him in. And he spent the next few months, this is where we were going to pick up, carving the wind flutes you can see along the wire. She goes, oh, okay, that explains. He says, I'm glad you understand because I'm clueless. I don't understand this. For one thing, okay, they're flutes. What should a flute do when you blow in it? Makes a noise, makes a sound. The wind flute, wind blows through it, it should make a sound. He's assuming. No sound, no matter how hard the wind blows. They have charter symbols on them I'd never seen before he carved them, and I've never seen again. And when he started placing them one at night, the dead just gradually disappeared. Okay? So, he continues talking, and he says, whatever it was, it worked. We're deeply indebted to Abhorsen. That makes his daughter an honored guest. This is page 47. She goes, well, probably not so honored as reviled. He's missing. Something's happened to him. He says, I thought something was up. Why? Because she's carrying his sword, and he recognizes the bandolier around her arm. She says he's trapped in death, or he might even be dead, and his bindings will be broken. Now, he understands that because of the wind flutes. He's like, wait. Broken? All the dead here? Because for 20 years, it's these flutes that are tied along the barbed wire that are stopping the dead from coming back. And if he's now gone, these are powerless, he realizes literally all hell will break loose. Sabriel explains about the flutes. The flutes play a song only heard in death. Okay? Are the bells only heard in death? No. We could hear those bells right here if somebody had them and could ring them. Okay? Certain of the bells, if we were here and they were real and somebody played them, what would happen to us? We'd all die. Okay? With one of the bells, we would all immediately die. Continuing a binding laid down by Abhorsen. That is, he bound the dead, and the flutes kind of, keep it going. They're the battery pack, so to speak, to keep the dead dead. But the bound are tied to him. And the flutes will have no power if if he's also dead, and he's like, okay, not good, not good. But we're also told, the beginning of the next chapter, 49, now she's beginning to expand her knowledge. Notice, how well does she know her father? How well did she know her father? Did they, he would come visit her twice a year. Did they spend time just talking about what he did? Not a lot. What often happened? What was he doing with her, for her, to her? Training her, preparing her. Why? She's next in line. Okay? It's kind of like royalty. A king doesn't get to be a quote-unquote normal father to a son who's a prince. Why? When I'm dead, you've got the job. In other words, we can't just horse around. We just can't be normal because I've got to prepare you for putting on that stupid circle of gold that puts the whole weight of whatever the kingdom is on you. To understand that he was more than just your father, he was many different things to different people. Okay? So, Horace, he's thinking one thing now. How much time? That is, if he's really dead, when does the battery pack wear out? Sorry, she says. Why? Because she's thinking about what she's thinking about. He's kind of thinking about more the here and now, the right now. How long till the bindings fail? Page 50? Depends. Not the answer he wants. Because what does she mean? It depends. Could be next week. Could be the week after that. Could be, He's thinking, I've got to prepare. Because how well are most of his men prepared to take on, quote unquote, the dead? Not really. Okay? She says, okay, so if he's truly dead, the wind flutes will simply fall apart under the light of the next full moon. So he's immediately thinking, almanac. Where's an almanac? When's the next full moon? If he's trapped before the 9th gate, because there are 9 gates in death, the binding will continue until the full moon after he passes beyond. So if he's in the 8th gate, and the full moon comes and goes, fine. But if after that full moon comes and goes, then he passes beyond the 9th gate, then the next full moon. So they've got at most, what? Maybe 2 months. Maybe. Let's say yesterday was the full moon. Okay? And he's in the 8th gate. And then in 30 days, he goes beyond the 9th gate. Okay? And then you have another 30 to 31 days. Whenever the full moon comes. Okay? So he says, so the moon. Well, let's see. We've got 14 days till it's full. She says, well, I could maybe bind the dead. I mean, I haven't done it this sort of scale, which, hundreds or thousands. But I know how. The only thing is, if Father isn't beyond the 9th gate, then I got to help him come. Notice what she's thinking her job is. What does a necromancer usually do within the course of the novel? Bring somebody back. What's the abhorsen do? Makes them stay. Okay? She's thinking, bring him back. Why? He's my father. What is abhorsen? I can't ask that question yet, because you've probably not gotten there. So she says, I got to go to his house, I got to get some stuff, etc., etc. Okay? So he gives her a map, or they have a map, and he says, that's a charter stone, or part of one. It's broken, this page 54. It's called Cloven Crest now. But the map doesn't show villages and towns, at least not near the old wall. And she's kind of surprised, page 54. She says, I remember. And he says, farther. You go deeper into the Old Kingdom. Yeah, there you've got towns and cities and such. Okay? We know that the people up there call the area around the wall the borderlands. They don't say it with any fondness. Why? It's because it's on the border of Angelstier, and the people far to the north, they, those dumb, stupid, mortal hicks kind of a thing. Those people without magic. Could be. What else, however, does borderland imply? Who lives on borders? Canadians, Mexicans. Okay, so those are our two borders, because we don't have Pacificians and Atlanteans, or Atlanteans, as far as we know. Who else? What's meant? Okay, if this is the capital, and this is the border. Think, Hunger Games. If you're familiar with Hunger Games, who lives in District 1? Okay, and then you'll go all the way out, right? Who's all the way out here? Yeah, the farther out you get, the poorer you become. What else? What's the relation of the people all the way out here in Districts 11 and 12 and 13 with the people in the castle? Josie, you're sitting there shaking your head. What's the difference between where we live right now and the power and influence we have versus somebody in an exact same classroom in Washington, D.C.? How much influence do you have in D.C.? Okay. We are kind of, in that sense, we're in the borderlands. Not really, because we're all citizens, all that kind of stuff. But when you get into the borderlands, you have the people who aren't fully part of the society. And bear in mind, if you're talking about a borderland where you're between two nations or city-states kind of thing, where you have a capital here, here's another one, and you've got a capital here, that's the borderland. Where are they? Are they A's or B's? They're in the middle. Okay? So the Northerners look down at the borderlands, and it's kind of this in-between place. It's not really part of us, and it's not really part of them. Okay? They keep talking, and page 56, Horace says, I have a daughter your age. Just about your age, he says. And with my wife back in the Old Kingdom, I wouldn't let her cross into the Old Kingdom. And Sabriel says, I'm only 18 years old on the outside. What does it mean on the outside? Here? But I first walked in death when I was 12. 6 years ago. 1/3 of my life. Okay? I encountered a 5th gate wrestler when I was 14, banished it beyond the 9th gate. When I was 16, I stalked and banished a mordicant that came near the school. A weakened mordicant, okay, but still, mordicant's a pretty powerful dead spirit. A year ago, I turned the final page of the Book of the Dead, meaning I've read it all. Okay? I don't feel young anymore. Well, yeah, if you were 12 and you, quote unquote, walked into death and came back out, you wouldn't feel very young. You kind of imagine maybe a few gray streaks in the hair a little bit. The Colonel, I'm sorry for that. Why? What did she never really have? Go back to the analogy of king and prince. Normal childhood. When did she start reading the Book of the Dead? Not when she was 12. Long before that. This is nighttime fairy tale reading for her. How to bind the nasty, icky boogeyman. How to bind the etc., etc. I mean, I wish you some of the foolish joys my daughter has. About the same age, he says. Some of the lightness, the lack of responsibility that goes with youth. But I don't wish it if it will weaken you in the times ahead. You have chosen a difficult path. Okay, so what does he mean? I don't wish it if it will weaken you in the times ahead. What's one of the things going in his mind?
I still got to live.
Yeah, so I don't want you to go all flighty on me. Don't go all airheady. Why? Because 2 weeks, the dead are going to rise. And I need you to be sharp as a tack. You've chosen a difficult path. Has she? She says, does the walker choose the path or the path the walker? Did she get to choose that path? Did she get to choose to be born? No, she didn't. Okay. Does she come at a certain age and her father will say, all right, Sabriel, now's the time. You get to choose. Will you be the next Abhorsen, or will you be just another typical 18, 19, 20, whatever, year-old young lady? You choose. Bear the problems of the world, bind the dead, etc., or go off for drinks and fun. She doesn't get to that choice, does she? Those words were the dedication in the front of her almanac. They were also the very last words, all alone, on the last page of the Book of the Dead. Does the walker choose the path, or the path the walker? In The Lord of the Rings, there's a passage where Frodo and Sam are going along with Gollum, and they're making their way through the paths of the dead. And Frodo asks Gollum, how is our path laid? In other words, how do we get through this marshland, this boggy swampland? Because if they take a step too far to the right, they could die. Okay? And then later on, Frodo says, this is how our path is laid, Sam. And what he's implying there is, I don't have any freedom. I don't have any free will. I don't have any choice. This is simply what we have to do. Okay? Horace, I've heard that before. What does it mean? Over my pay grade. She says, I don't know. Yeah, but it holds power when you say it. In other words, if Horace had said, does the walker choose the path or the path the walker? It would sound like anybody else. But when she says it, it almost sounds like, thus saith the Lord. It's prophetic like. If I spoke those words, that's all they'd be, just words. I can't explain it. I do know other sayings. You want to hear a nice little aphorism here? Here's one. Traveler, embrace the morning light, but do not take the hand of night. I must be on my way. And he's probably thinking, okay. And she's like, I don't know what that one means either. So he smiles, says, all right, your papers are in order. You can go. Okay, so they make their way to the fence. And page 61, the stones of the wall, top of the page, on either side and above her head, seem to call a welcome home. And rivulets. Now, we usually only use the word rivulet to describe what? Water moving. Rivulets of charter marks ran through the stones like rain through dust. And again, I'm going to use the analogy of the film The Matrix. It's like just seeing those numbers, ones and zeros, just moving all throughout this thing. The old kingdom welcomes you, he says, looking at the charter marks run on the stones. Wishes her success. She goes through the wall, through the gate, and she finds the first dead Ancelstiran soldier. You can see how battery's dying. About 6 miles past the wall. Okay. She sees him. She hasn't reached that Cloven Crest thing. That's still a mile or two north. And we're told if she hadn't stopped, she would probably have missed, this is page 63, the frosted white hand that peeked out of a drift on the other side of the road. Soon as she sees it, she feels the familiar pang of death. So there's snow. There wasn't any snow on the other side of the wall. This snow is deep enough to bury a body, but there's just a hand sticking up. Okay? She reaches down, blonde, gray-eyed. He'd been surprised. She touches his forehead with one finger, closes his eyes, lays 2 fingers against his open mouth. He's been dead 12 days, she felt, which is kind of weird because I wonder how she can close his eyes if he's been dead 12 days. I mean, everything would be stiff. Okay? No obvious signs as to what had killed him. No slash marks, no burn marks, no gun marks. 12 days dead, he's probably not beyond the 4th gate into death. Notice, dead here, this thing, dead 12 days. The spirit slash soul, gone. What's going to start happening 12 days? Yeah, decay. I mean, yesterday was in the Orthodox Church, yesterday was Palm Sunday, not last week. And Saturday was what's called Lazarus Saturday, where we commemorate the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Well, Lazarus was 4 days dead when Jesus went to him and called him forth, and people were going, no, he's going to stink. He's been in a tomb for 4 days. Body. He's dead 12 days, but he's under snow. Okay? But the body still starts to decompose. So, notice, quashing her natural curiosity to find out exactly what had happened. In other words, to go into death, and she does what? She folds his arms across his chest, probably because he's been dead for 12 days. I think, she's got to break his arms to do that, the joints, okay? Folds his arms across his chest. After first unclenching the grip that his right hand still had on his sword hilt, she stood, drew the charter marks of fire, cleansing peace and sleep in the air above the corpse. I don't know what that means. Drew something with her hand, some kind of movement, while whispering the sounds of the same marks. It was a litany that every charter mage knew, and it had the usual effect. Now, I was rereading that this morning, which made me put all this up. This is all this kind of symbolism that comes from the Christian church that Nix uses, and yet it's not used for quote-unquote Christian/religious purposes in here. In other words, it's language that he adopts for the religion, if you want to call it that he creates here, okay? But, the novel begins with the prologue, and we see the guy with the ash on his forehead, like Ash Wednesday when Western Catholics, Western Christians put ash on. You've got the baptism. You've got the christening. Here you have a litany. What's a litany? It's a series of prayers, okay? Well, that's what she's doing. We're going to see very shortly cross symbolism. What does she do? She takes the sword from the pile of ashes because she does this litany of prayers, and what happens to the guy's body? Poof. Burns. Okay? She takes the sword, thrusts it through the ashes into the melted snow. It stuck fast upright, the hilt, casting a shadow like a cross upon the ashes. Okay? There's no other way to read that other than symbolism. Nix wants us to associate the cross in some way, that is, in our world, with this imagery, even though there is no Jesus in this world. Okay? Something glinted in the shadow, and belatedly Sabriel remembered that the soldier would have worn an identity disc or tag. Okay? That is something that said his name. So why use this? Oh, by the way, this image, the sword hilt and pommel and such, creating a cross image, we're going to see the exact same thing at almost the very end. So he's using some of this imagery for foreshadowing for later on, but it might also be some of, I don't know if I've used this terminology here, this kind of ring symbolism, where you have something early happen, and it has a parallel later. And then you have something else, and it comes, and notice these are going on the inside. Okay? Because it's this envelope, like skin of an onion. All right. So she goes on, page 66. She had always been told that the Old Kingdom was dangerous, and the borderlands near the wall particularly so. Okay, particularly so means what? More so. So it's kind of like the farther north she would go into the Old Kingdom, the safer she would become. But that intellectual knowledge, what's the difference between intellectual knowledge and experiential knowledge? What's the difference between reading about learning how to drive a stick shift, manual transmission, and actually doing it?
Like book smart versus street smart.
Yeah, it's book smart versus street smart. Book smart, you can read all the books in the world and be the dumbest dumbass in the world. And you can also be the street smartest person in the world and not know 2 + 2 = 4. Okay? She'd always been told, but the intellectual knowledge was tempered by her vague childhood memories of happiness, of being with her father. So, book smarts, intellectual smarts tell her, Old Kingdom's dangerous. Her memories, however, tell her, I remember fun. So what do you do when your memories are at odds with what your book learning tells you? What do you trust? Do you trust the book learning, or do you trust your experiences? Now the reality of the danger is slowly coming home. In other words, now she is beginning to develop experience that matches the intellectual knowledge. I mean, she's barely even into the Old Kingdom, and she's found her first corpse. And this isn't somebody who died a natural death. Okay? She sees a bird of prey, a hawk or a kite or something. It falls. And at the same time, page 67, she felt the tug of human death somewhere ahead, near where the kite died. There's more people dead. In other words, this bird of prey, what does that usually mean? What kind of prey does a bird of prey normally, we think, eat? What kind? Rabbits, mice, etc. Living stuff that it swoops down and kills, right? This one? In other words, birds of prey will also be what? Okay, what else? Scavengers. I mean, if there's a dead deer, you don't have to work for it. They'll go pluck the meat from a deer as much as they will work after catching a squirrel or rabbit or something like that. Okay? So she pulls her sword, she goes up, and what happens? She finds more dead. This time she finds a band of soldiers. 7 people. Page 70. She's thinking, how could 7 people be alive in one instant and then dead? She felt the temptation of the necromancer. I could go into death. I could figure this out. But without their heads, well, that's, little interesting detail. She could only bring them back as hands, a derogatory term that free magic necromancers use for their lackluster revenants who retain little of their original intelligence and none of their initiative. Why would they have little of their natural intelligence? Because, they're dead and their heads are missing. They would be like, in another book we read, the Cauldron Born. Okay? Well, she doesn't have any desire to do that to these what were once people. They made useful servants, though, either as reanimated corpses or the more difficult shadow hands, etc. But also, without their heads, she can't do what? She can't give them peace. That's why the heads have been separated from them. She can't give them There's another one. The final rites, last rites, and free their spirits. So she risks the charter mark, and we're told, page 71, for as she left the bodies behind, an answering light burned into brilliance on the upper post of the bridge. That is, she's on one side of the bridge, there's another side. It faded into red embers almost immediately, but left 3 glowing charter marks. One was strange to Sabriel, but the other 2 told her, there's a message here. Okay? 3 of the dead soldiers had the feel of charter magic about them. Sabriel guessed they were charter mages. So what does she do? She touches her forehead to the charter mark, and then she touches the bridge post. This is not, like an El Marco, or an indelible pin mark. This is like a scar on her forehead. All right? She touches it, she touches the bridge post. The marks flare, then they go dark, and then she hears a voice. One of the greater dead. Exclamation. This is yelling. It came behind us almost from the wall. We couldn't turn back. It has servants, hands, a mordicant. Okay. Hands we've just heard described. Kind of dumb and stupid. They can be useful, though. A mordicant. Well, we already heard Sabriel tell Horace she put one of these things back to the dead when she was, 14? Okay, it was wounded. It was weak. The one she's going to meet, not wounded or weak. Okay? Next page. One of the greater dead was back in life. Okay, so what does that mean, one of the greater dead? How can you be a lesser dead? Does that mean not quite as dead? To be one of the greater dead? To have more influence on the living? Does it depend on where you are in the gates? We're not told until you get almost to the end, really, what it means. But we are told, or what is implied, is what about it? It's powerful, you don't want to mess with it. You kind of back away. How powerful is Sabriel at this point? Can she take on a quote-unquote one of the greater dead? No. She could barely, a few years ago, take on a weakened, wounded mordicant. Okay? So, she goes on. She comes to Cloven Crest. She sees the charter marks on the stone. And what else does she realize? Okay, it's a charter stone that's been shattered. Page 76. Only some terrible power of free magic could split a charter stone. Okay? So she goes closer to it. Well, what kind of magic? Somebody had been sacrificed on this stone. Sacrificed by a necromancer to gain access to death, to open up death. Okay? I'm going to skip a bunch because we need to. So, page 80, she starts pulling off the bells. And we hear she goes through them. We'll probably have a quiz on Wednesday. Expect maybe the bells to be on there. Maybe extra credit, maybe not. Rana, Sleepbringer. Okay? Mosrael, the Waker. Kibeth, the Walker. Direm, Voice that the dead so often lost. Bell Gaer, something like that. The Thinking Bell, the bell most necromancers scorn to use. It could restore independent thought, memory, and all the patterns of a living person, or erase them. Serenet, the deepest, lowest bell, the sound of strength, the binder, the bell that shackled the dead to the wielder's will. Astarael, the sorrowful, the banisher, the final bell. You ring this one, and everybody who hears it, they go far into death. Okay? So she kind of goes through them, stops on Rana for a minute, and she goes to what? Sereneth, which was the deepest, lowest, the sound of strength, the binder, the bell that shackled the dead to the wielder's will. Okay? And we're told, page 82, she bows her head, she gets ready to go into death. Unseen by Sabriel, the inscription began, I was made for Abhorsen to slay those already dead. Made for Abhorsen. So what does that mean? This is like a pistol grip that has what on it? Close. Fingerprint ID. You know, you can now get a pistol grip for a pistol so that it only works with your hand on it. So anybody else picks up that pistol and tries to pull the trigger, it doesn't do anything. The bells only work for Abhorsen. So she's not thinking about this because she's still thinking Abhorsen is where? Somewhere up there in dead. Okay? But if the bell works for her, what is that telling us, the readers? Okay. She's the Abhorsen. We already know she's Abhorsen in waiting. Maybe it's in waiting no longer. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna skip a bunch. Just gotta skip a bunch. She sees the spirit of her mother. Mother tells her to go to the bridge, tells her where to go. Page 95. Thralk, the Mordicant. Okay. Is there, 94 and 95. He gurgles, "Curse you! I will tell the servants of Caragor, I will be revenged." His grotesque gulping voice was chopped off in mid-sentence as Thralk lost free will. Sereneth had bound him, but Kibeth, sorry, this isn't the Mordicant, this is another one. But Kibeth gripped him, and Kibeth walked him, so Thralk would be no more, and she, sends him off to the dead. Let's skip a whole bunch. And pages 106 and 107, chapter 7. She's in the cave, she's got the door shut, and a man steps out of the stones of the wall. Tall, obviously strong man, long sword, the twin of Sabriel's. Sword comes whistling down on the Mordicant's arm, biting out a chunk of burning marsh rotten flesh. And she realizes, not an ordinary man, well, obviously because he came out of stone, a charter ghost, ascending. Okay? Ascending means somebody else is doing that sending. Or somebody else put it there so that when certain conditions were met, it would be sent. It would come out of the stone. Sabriel thanks it. She asks, will it get through? Yes. In other words, tick-tock. Time is running. So she runs. She runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. Got to skip a bunch. And she realizes running water. Running water will stop the Mordicant. We're not told why exactly until later on. Okay? And let's see here. She gets to Abhorsen's bridge. Okay? So you have a cliff, and there's a way to get down to the cliff, and then there's a river, and there's a bit of shore before the river. So you got a big wide river. How wide is the river? I think it's described as quarter mile or half mile wide, something like that. Out in the middle of it, here we'll just use this. Out in the middle of it, there's an island, okay? And then there's same distance on the other side, and then there's more land over here. This is Abhorsen's island. This is where his house is, okay? And it's got a bridge across it that she can get across, right? But she's got to get rid of the bridge. Well, then what's the Mordicant going to attempt to do? How? Who's going to build it for him? Live people? Okay. When she was halfway out with 100 yards of pure, ferocious water behind her, she stopped and looked back. Okay. Halfway, 100 yards behind her, so there's another 100 yards that way. So that's 220 yards, and another 220 yards. That's your quarter mile. The Mordecant's on the ledge. The silvery portcullis broken, mangled in script. No sign of the gate warden. Defeated, it would merely fade. She's thinking this is what's going to happen, right? But no, it just kind of stands there for a minute. And then she moves on. Wearily, she made the jump to the last stone because the bridge isn't a real bridge, it's rocks. And she gets to the house, bronze door knocker, shape of a lion's head. She lay on the bricks and essentially collapses. And there's a cat, page 118. Hello, puss, croaked Sabriel, coughing as she staggered once more to her feet, walked forward, groaning and creaking with every step. She reached down to pat the cat and froze. For as the cat thrust its head up, she saw the collar round its neck. Very important here. And I really encourage you, if you get even the least bit interested in this book, read the next two. Because the third one kind of turns things upside down, especially with the cat and the collar. The collar was only red leather, but the charter spell on it was the strongest, most enduring binding Sabriel had ever seen or felt, and the bell was a miniature serenade, the binding bell. So the cat on its collar has one of these things. What's that tell you? Ain't just a cat. Okay? The cat was no cat, but a free magic creature of ancient power. Free magic, what does that mean? Not bound by the charter. The charter is kind of like a free magic thing also. And what we'll find out later on, if you read all three books, is that there were several free magic beings, if you want. Okay? This is one of them. Like a god. Okay? And now it's a god in a cat form. The collar that binds it. And the cat speaks. Abhorsen, about time you got here. She's like, what? I'm not Abhorsen. Okay. So, cat is introduced to us as Mogget. Has a variety of names, notice, but you can call me Mogget. We're going to skip a bunch. Go to 131. Yeah, I think we'll just finish. Sabriel asked 130, how'd you know I was coming? I didn't know myself until... And Mogget says, 131, I have served 10 times as many of your forebears as you have years. How old is she? 18. He has served 10 times as many of your forebears as you have years. So 10 times 18 is 180. He has served 180 Abhorsens. He hasn't served for 180 years. Okay, so, just say for the heck of it, average life expectancy of an Abhorsen once they become Abhorsen is 10 years. 1,800 years. He has served. Served how? Ring-a-ding. He's using serve kind of facetiously. He's been bound. Okay? And though my powers wane with the ebb of time, I always know when one Abhorsen falls and another takes their place. This is his ever so subtle a way of saying, Daddy dearest is dead. What do you mean by fall? What do you mean? What do you know? What has happened? He's dead, Sabriel. Even if he hasn't passed the final gate, that is the 9th gate, he will walk in life no more. You're not going to pull him back. No, he can't be. He's a necromancer. Necromancers can't be dead. Lord Voldemort thinks, assumes in the Harry Potter novels, his mother couldn't have been magic because she died. And obviously, if you magical, you can what? Stop yourself from ever dying. That's why his name means fly from death. That is why he sent the sword and bells to you, as his aunt sent them to him in her time. He wasn't the necromancer, he was Abhorsen. The two are not the same. The necromancer is one who does magic on the dead. He's not the same. She's like, I don't understand. I don't know enough. Did you read the Book of the Dead? Yes? Well, then you know enough. Why do you say his name as if it were a title? It is. He was the Abhorsen, now you are. In other words, she's no longer what? Sabriel. Tamagat. Okay? But he calls her Sabriel. Why? She wants him to. She refuses to accept the other. And he's figuring, okay, it's going to take her time to accept the new title. Okay? 133. She says, Father is not yet truly dead. He's only mostly dead. I felt his presence, though he's trapped beyond many gates. I could bring him. You must not. What would happen if she were to bring him back? Okay, keep in mind, let's use the image of the guy who's been dead 12 days. We already said, what's going to start happening to the body? Even in snow. Well, there's little microorganisms and they start to slowly feast on. He's been dead. How long? We're not told exactly, but by the time she gets to him, back here, long time. Right? A few weeks, at least. I felt his presence. You must not. You are Abhorsen and must put the dead to. That's what the Abhorsen does. It's the sole job. Put the dead to rest. Tombstone, R.I.P. That's what you do. I can walk a different path. What's she saying? Tradition, history, I don't have to do that. I can find my own way. Margaret, do as you, whatever. Whatever. What should I gain? Why should I gainsay you? I am but a slave bound to service. Why would I weep if Abhorsen falls to evil? Your father would curse you, your mother too, and the dead will be merry. I don't think he's dead. His spirit felt alive. He's trapped in death, but his body lives. Would I still be reviled if I brought him back then? What does she mean? His body's living, but his soul is in death. Well, what has she done several times? He went there of his own volition. He has not been killed where the body is dead. I mean, what did she say about the dead guy who'd been dead for 12 days? His soul hadn't gone past the final gate. It's moving that way. It's making its way. It's moving that way. If she were to bring him back, what would be the problem? This part is dead. Dead. Okay, so maybe Abhorsen's body isn't dead. But what have we already seen? What happens when Abhorsen goes into death, sends the spirit into death? What happens to the body? Ice cases in it. It gets encased in ice. So what happens to a body that gets encased in ice if it's still alive? Fingers, toes, ears, frostbite. The longer and longer and longer, that's what happens. Okay? No, says Margaret, you wouldn't be reviled if you brought him back again. But he sent you the bells and sword. That's a dead giveaway. No pun intended. You're only wishing that he lives. I feel it. I must find out if my feeling, and I hate all this talk about feelings, Luke Skywalker-ish. Margaret, perhaps it is so, though strange. I've grown dull. This scholar strangles me, chokes my wits. What's he saying? If you'd loosen the collar a little bit, maybe I'd understand. Help me, Margaret, help me, I need to know so much. We've heard that kind of language before. in other books. I want to know versus something else. I'm the servant of Abhorsen. You are Abhorsen, so I must help you. You must promise me you will not raise your father if his body is dead. Notice, big caveat. If he's dead, you won't bring him back. I can't promise. Well, she can. She won't promise. Okay? Let's see. She pulls out the Book of the Dead. He says, page 139, I'm just going to try to get through this real fast. I see you found that book. Take care you don't read too much. She says, it doesn't matter. I've already read it, right? Everybody in here has a book you've read more than once, probably. She says, yeah, I've read it already. Perhaps, but it's not always the same book. Why not?
Take something different away from it and read it later.
Why?
Because you grow. Different situation.
Difference, because the you reading the book now is not the you that read the book before. I mean, I had somebody post something on one of my YouTube videos. Says, I can't believe you've read the Silmarillion as many times as you have, and you see something new every time. It's like that way. I'll be teaching my Harry Potter course, and I'm like, oh, and I'll make a comment right there. I've been teaching it for 20 years. Okay, why? Because we go through different experiences, and those experiences affect us, and they affect how we see things. So that when we come back to something, it's not that this has changed. It's that our perception has changed. Okay, we'll stop there. Let's plan on a quiz. Let's say up through about 236. I just have to remember to remind myself.